In the year 2020, we are in a new hamlet of Plum Village. Right now in the new hamlet, we have about, I think, a congregation of about 65 people here. But I'm aware that at this very moment, I am also there in the lower hamlet, in the upper hamlet, and elsewhere where friends are joining us for the sharing this morning. Mindfulness, concentration, and insight are the essence of Plum Village practices. And we know that we are reminded every day to cultivate the energies of mindfulness, concentration, and insight. And that our whole day in the monastery, from the very first moment as we woke up to the last moments when we are in bed, falling asleep, our practices, all our practices are aiming at cultivating these energies inside ourselves. And so it's appropriate, right, to mention it over and over again, even though you may have heard this 1,000 times or even more. But it is always a really good reminder to cultivate mindfulness, concentration, and insight. And especially for many of our friends who are joining us today for the talk. Many of you may not be very familiar with these practices, with mindfulness, concentration, and insight. I wanted just to mention very briefly what they are so that we know that meditation practice, the essence of meditation practice is to cultivate these energies in us. Mindfulness is the awareness of what's going on inside our body, inside our feeling, our mind, and also in the surrounding, what's happening in the surrounding. And mindfulness is like a light that when we are able to come back to our breath, when we are able to make mindful steps, we light up this light in our heart, in our mind, so that we can see clearly, we can see what it is that's unfolding in the present moment on the domain of our body, our feelings, our perceptions, our mental formations, and our consciousness. And when we are present and aware of what's happening, we're truly there. We're present, we're focused, we're not running away anymore in our head. We're there to see, and that's called concentration. We're concentrated in what it is that we are looking at, of what it is that we are aware. And it's that energies of being present and concentrated that we begin to see deeply into the causes and conditions, the roots of why things the way they are, of why we are the way we are. And that's called insight, understanding. And it's the understanding, it's the insight that helps us to transform the situation that help us to be free from whatever it is that we are still clinging on to, or whatever it is that we're not yet free. And so these three energies are very important. They are the energies of the Buddha inside ourselves. It's the baby Buddha inside ourselves. These energies, once they are activated, generated, it's like the baby Buddha in us is coming alive. And the stronger these energies are, the stronger and the bigger that baby Buddha is inside us. And it's such simple practices, that we do every day to generate these energies. The breathing, being aware of our breath, being aware of our body, being aware of our steps, being aware of what's happening in our heart, in our mind. Simple practices. But once we are able to be aware, once the energy of mindfulness, concentration, and insight are there, it takes us to a different dimension of experience of these things. Simple, isn't it? And doable also. Accessible, doable practices. But my question is, for myself and for you, is why is it that we're still struggling so much? Why is it that these practices are simple, and yet in our daily life, most of the time, we're not mindful? Right? Who among us here who's mindful most of the day? Can you raise your hand? I don't see any hands. I wonder if the upper Hamlet or lower Hamlet had any hands up. But anyways, what is it? Why is it? And that's my question that I ask every single day. Why is it that I know these energies are so important, and I know these energies are innate in me, and all I need to do is just tap into these energies with all these practices, and voila, I'm enlightened. And yet it's not simple as it's not simple to do as it sounds. And it's not because, I don't have the environment to do it. It's not because my sisters are not supporting me to practice. There's something about me, about my mind, that's really preventing me from really dwelling deeply in the present moment and from really embracing wholeheartedly in these practices that I know are so beneficial for me. And that my aspiration as a monastic is to really cultivate these energies in me so that I can be free, so that I can help other people to be free and to be happy. And so why is it? And so that's the question that I always ask myself. So today, we can explore why. And also in the context of what we have been talking about during this retreat, and also what's happening in the world right now with discrimination. And the question also came up was, where's discrimination coming from? Is discrimination only happening to a certain number of people? Is it only in people with particular skin color? What is it? Where is it coming from? We learned that, and Thai repeated over and over again, and the Buddha also, that everything is a manifestation of our mind. Even our physical body is a manifestation of our mind. Even our physical illness is a manifestation of our mind. The environment is a manifestation of our mind. And so the studies of the mind, the understanding of the mind, it's so crucial in the practice. Because without the understanding of how the mind works, of our mind, we will struggle and we will continue to struggle. And we will always be in the dark, not knowing why we are the way we are. So I'll start with that. Sister Yak Nyim, who is here with us now in the New Hamlet, shared last Sunday on the consciousness already. So I'm going to mention again to refresh our memory. A lot of us here in Plum Village have already know this, but a lot of our friends may not be very familiar with it, so bear with me, sisters. So we love to use this image, circle, as our consciousness. And we learned from last week that there's many different levels of consciousness. There are different layers of consciousness. We have learned that there is the store consciousness, which is the depths of our consciousness, the base of our consciousness. The foundation of our consciousness, where all kinds of seeds are preserved and kept in it. All kinds of imaginable seeds are kept in here. From the most negative to the most positive, like a whole spectrum of seeds in here. So that's what we've learned over and over again. And we know on the upper level of consciousness are the sense consciousnesses. Just one thing I want to mention about store consciousness before I go into sense consciousness is that store consciousness, it's also impermanent and non-self, in a sense that there's always input and output, that nothing is static in here, that store consciousness is made of my own consciousness, the individual consciousness, but also it's made of the collective consciousness. So both, it's thanks to impermanent non-self, and that's why, it's individual, but at the same time it's collective. And we know that there's no separate self in store consciousness. And then on the upper level of consciousness are the five senses. The eye consciousness, the ear consciousness, the nose consciousness, the tongue consciousness, and the body consciousness. These are like windows for us to come in touch with the outside world, for its door to come in touch with the outside world. And they do look like windows, aren't they? Little windows. These are where the inputs come in, and also outputs as well. And the sixth consciousness is the mind consciousness. But today, what I wanted to talk about is the manas, our friend. Manas. I have always wanted to talk about manas, and it's never had a chance to do it, and that's because it's not, the topic for the discussion. We drew up this diagram so that we understand, the different levels of consciousness, but we don't say too much. I've never said a lot on manas, but today this is my topic, is manas, the tendencies of manas, and how is that affecting discrimination and all that. So manas, it's a function of consciousness. Before I go into manas, let me just talk a little bit about the six consciousnesses, because manas plus with the six consciousnesses are what we call the evolving consciousnesses. Evolving because it comes out from store consciousness. It evolves from store consciousness. Manas is one of those evolving consciousness. It also comes out from store consciousness. It comes from the seed of delusion and craving in the store consciousness. It comes up, and then manas comes back down to store consciousness and kind of like clinging onto a part of the store consciousness. And claim that part of store consciousness as its lover, its self. Manas grasp onto store consciousness, a part of the store consciousness, and consider it as its beloved, and identifies it as its self, as a self. And so manas is where the belief or the idea of a separate self stems from. It is also the defense mechanism or the survival instinct inside us. Manas is the preservation of a self. And there are 4 characteristics of manas. The first one, it's called ngã si in Vietnamese. Ngã si means it's an ignorance about self, about self. It is the ignorance, the delusion that claims that there is a separate self or a separate identity. Ngã kiến, which is the wrong view of a self. It's a view, it's a perception, it's an idea of a separate self that discriminates self from things that are non-self. In other words, self, my 5 skandhas, body, feeling, perception, mental formation, and consciousness as myself. And everything else is not self. And ngã mạn is a complex of the self. It is the pride of the self, the arrogance of the self, which is also the cause of looking down on everything that is non-self. And ngã ái is the love of the self. It's the attachment to the self, or the clinging to the idea of a separate entity, a separate identity, separate existence. So we know that these four characteristics are the basis of this inherent belief and idea in a separate self. And it is also the cause of a lot of our suffering. The feeling of separation, loneliness, alienation. You know, a lot of us are, especially during this COVID time, there are a lot of people out there who are feeling really lonely, really alienated, and separated from everything and everyone. It is also the base of all the killing that's happening. And believe it or not, also the climate change is coming out from this, because there's this idea that this is me, I protect myself, and I get, whatever it is for my benefit, for the benefit of the self, disregard of what's happening with the others, with the environment, with the earth. And we consume in ways that are not really in line with respect to Mother Earth and care for Mother Earth, because we just wanted to satisfy our needs, and our needs is really bottomless. Needs comforts, a lot of material things. I don't know what do people needs out there anyways. A lot of money, maybe. A lot of consumption. Yeah. There's so many people who have so much. And there are people who don't have anything. And if they could just give a little bit of what they have, maybe the poor people or the people who are in disadvantaged situation could could be a great relief for them. But that's not always the case. Manas it's there. Manas is there and say, this is me, I need to protect myself, and I need to get for myself. More, the more, the better. And who cares about other people? That's them. But we know with the climate situation, that's not, the realities is that what affects the other is also affect me. And we see that really clearly with the climate change, right? That's what is happening on the other side of the planet is affecting us. And what's affecting us here, what we are, our behavior here is affecting people on the other side of the planet. There's this interconnectedness that often we really don't recognize. And so, so manas, its functions is to appropriate a self, right? And so it avoids all kinds of suffering. It avoids suffering. It runs away from suffering. It doesn't want to face suffering. That sounds familiar, isn't it? You know, a lot of us, it is hard to face our suffering. It is really overwhelming to look at our suffering. Sometimes it's not even possible for us to go back to ourselves and look at our suffering. Because manas does not want to admit that there is suffering. Manas would find all possible ways to run away from suffering. And manas ignores the goodness of suffering. We know that in the Four Noble Truths, the first of those truths is suffering. And why is it that suffering is a noble truth? It can only be noble truth when we recognize that there is suffering. We admit that we do have suffering and we are staying with that suffering. We are recognizing it. We're facing it so that we can understand the causes and conditions that brought about the suffering. The suffering had been made at some point in our life. And so when we are able to stay with our suffering, when we are able to practice embracing, being mindful of the suffering, then we can begin to see the causes and conditions. And that's the second noble truth. And it's only when we are able to see the causes and conditions of our suffering that we can do something to transform our suffering. And that's the fourth noble truth. And these practices of the the Noble Eightfold Path, which is the fourth noble truth, are practices that help us to experience great happiness and freedom. So it's the suffering that help us to experience happiness and freedom. Manas does not see that. Manas simply does not want to face suffering and does not see that there's goodness in suffering. And because it doesn't see the goodness of suffering, it also ignores the interbeing between suffering and happiness. It doesn't see that the lotuses need mud to grow, and that without lotuses, without the mud, there wouldn't be any lotuses. And manas, another function of manas is that it seeks pleasures regardless of the danger or negative consequences. Short-lived pleasures, pleasures that would bring along with it a lot of pain and a lot of suffering. Manas doesn't care about the consequences that will come later on. Manas only wants to experience pleasure. And it ignores the danger of these pleasures. It ignores the danger of the pleasure seeking. And it also ignores the law of moderation. One of the things when I notice is that the New Hamlet, we cook really good food. And sometimes, because the food is good, sometimes we take more than what we need. And afterward, we'll complain, I'm too full, or I don't feel very comfortable because I ate too much. Well, that's manas playing with us. The manas doesn't know that, you just need to eat enough. That you don't need to eat too much. Manas doesn't know that the law of moderation. When something that manas perceived as being pleasant, good for it, it will hoard. And too much of something can make you sick, right? Even the good thing. Last week, Sister Yaknim talked about the original fear. Well, that's the work of manas. Manas is afraid of dying, hunger, loneliness, and abandoning. These are the original fears. In other words, its original desire, its deepest desire is to survive. That's the original desire. And so it would avoid, it's afraid of these things, dying, hunger, abandoning. And it doesn't see the danger of these fears, because this fear can be really overwhelming. And this fear can lead to destructive behavior. And it can prevent us from recognizing and enjoying the happiness in the present moment. It prevents us from enjoying whatever it is that we are having in the present moment. And so it doesn't recognize and it doesn't enjoy the happiness in the present moment, because it is always seeking for happiness, but it seeks for happiness elsewhere, not from here, like in the practice. And it doesn't see that the conditions of happiness are right here, right now. All we need to do is just to go back and be mindful of what we have. And we'll see that we have more than enough conditions to be happy here and now. We talked about, the feelings. Let me kind of mention this a little bit. There are three kinds of feelings, right? It's the pleasant feeling, the unpleasant feeling, and the neutral feeling. So we know that manas would seek out the pleasant feeling no matter what, right? And it would avoid the unpleasant feeling, right? But it doesn't recognize these neutral feelings that are abundance in our daily life. And that with mindfulness, we recognize that these feelings that we consider neutral, like a kind of like a black kind of feeling, like kind of blunt, kind of feelings that it's neither excites us nor creates suffering for us. These neutral feelings, if we are aware of them, if we recognize them, we realize that they are really conditions for happiness. And one example that Thai always talk about is the toothache. That right now, a lot of us do not have a toothache, and we don't recognize the happiness of not having a toothache. It is only when we have a toothache that we realize that not having a toothache, that neutral feeling that we are experiencing right now of not having a toothache, it's an element of happiness. So we know that where it's coming from, this kind of attitude, it's coming from manas. So next time when we notice that we're not appreciating anymore the conditions we have here and now, and not appreciating them and taking them for granted, we know that it is manas really working to take us away from appreciating deeply these neutral experiences that are really conditions for happiness. Manas doesn't see the environment as itself. It doesn't see the environment, it sees the environment as different from itself. And it just discriminates. This is self and this is not self. And so it has a tendency to discriminate, to reject what is not self. And so we know that the root of discrimination is really in manas, in every one of us. Right? It's a big part of our consciousness, this discriminative mind. The mind that discriminate. This is me, and this is mine, and this is not me and not mine. And that the only thing that I care for, that I protect, that I guard with my whole being is this, my 5 skandhas. And everything else is there to serve these 5 skandhas of mind. And so, in the context of discrimination, we see that everybody has these seeds. Everybody has the tendency to discriminate, not just people with a particular skin color. And often the victims of discrimination are also perpetrator of discrimination as well. And that for us to be able to really transform the discrimination in us, we really need to confront manas. And manas is not something easy to confront, by the way, because store consciousness and manas are functioning in ways that's not known to our conscious mind. In other words, we don't really have access to how they function. We can only see different manifestations in our consciousness now and then if we are aware of it. But actually, manas, it's working 24 hours a day and it's affecting everything about us, from the way we see ourselves, from the way we see other people, from the way we relate to other people, to the environment, to everything. And so, how do we practice? How do we practice to shed light on manas? How do we practice to recognize manas? How do we practice to be free from manas? And we know that store consciousness is impermanent and without a separate self, right? Manas, the good news is that manas also is impermanent and without a separate self. Manas is the deluded mind in us, right? And it is manas that limits us, the limitation of our consciousness. As I'm doing this, I think of a horse. You know, and they put like 2 boards on the side of the head of the horse so that the horse only see the front and that it can go straight to the front, but it doesn't go sideways, it doesn't get distracted. Well, manas is like that. It limits us from expanding ourselves. We are unlimited. We have all these unlimited potentials inside ourselves. We are much more than we think we are. We contain the whole universe. We are a miracle of life. We are a miracle of life. We are a part of these wonders of the universe. And yet, we only see ourselves this much. This is how much we see ourselves. You know, through our suffering, through these dramas that's happening every day, through the power struggles that we are having. And so because manas, it's impermanent, which means that it can be transformed, which means that we can really go beyond these limitations to experience ourselves as a true miracle of life. So where do we begin? We begin with mindfulness, concentration, and insight, right? That's the key in helping in transforming manas. It's really mindfulness, concentration, and insight. It's the practices. In other words, we are using, so the mind consciousness, the sixth consciousness, the mind consciousness is the mind consciousness relies on manas to manifest. So the base of mind consciousness is in manas. But at the same time, mind consciousness can do the work of cultivating mindfulness, concentration, and insight. In other words, it's the mind consciousness that can bring the light into manas and shed the light on manas. And so when we trained manas, mind consciousness, through the practices of mindfulness, concentration, and insight, we are really bringing the light in, and we are really creating neural pathways. We are educating manas to see interbeing, the nature of interbeing, to see the nature of interconnectedness, to see interdependent arising. Because we know that manas does not see interconnectedness, interbeing. Manas only see discrimination between self and non-self. And we're bringing these insights down to manas. And we have, like, all our practices in our daily life. It's really about bringing the light of these insights into manas. So when we talk about mindfulness, concentration, and insight, the really practice is for us to stop so that we can look deeply, right? In order to have this insight. The insight of interconnectedness, the insight of interbeing, the insight of non-self. And that these insights, we kind of download them to manas so that manas can be educated and can be transformed. So our practices are really to educate manas. But there are some practices that I found really, really helpful. One of those practices that I really enjoy are the practice of the gathas. We think that gathas are only used for novices, right? But actually they're really powerful tools to help us to look deeply. They're not just helping us to be present in everything that we do, but also they help us to look deeply as well. How many of us here practices the gathas? Look like the older sisters don't really practice the gathas anymore, huh? You think you're beyond that, right? Well, I found them really useful to help me to look deeply. And the other, and I will read some of the gathas later on that are so useful in helping us to see the interconnectedness, the interbeing nature. The other practices are the guided meditation. The guided meditation exercises that we've been doing during this rain retreat, they're very deep guided meditation exercises that help us to see our true nature, the nature of no birth, no death. And that every time we have a chance to go for sitting meditation, we have a chance to use this guided meditation to cultivate the insight of interconnectedness, of interbeing. And they help us to reflect. But a practice that I really enjoy doing is the practice of eating, because that's the most concrete practice that helped me to see the interconnected, the interbeing nature. The food that I consider, part of the environment that I consider, that manas consider not a self. As you eat this food with mindfulness, you realize that this food that you're chewing, it's becoming a part of you. You cannot live without food, right? We need this food for survival. So in a sense, this food, once it gets into our body, it's a part of us, right? But think about it, where's the food coming from? Okay, a few things. The sunshine, the rain, the earth, the air, farmers that bring them, my sisters who cook them. These elements that are non-food elements are really also a part of me, because without these elements, I wouldn't be able to survive. I wouldn't be able to have food to eat. So in a sense, these elements are also me, a part of me. They are indispensable for my survival. Manas doesn't see that, right? We know that Manas doesn't see that. But with mindfulness practices, we're seeing that insight. We're seeing that true reality. And so the practice of eating meditation, it's a really powerful practice for us to help experience the insight of non-self, of interconnectedness, of interbeing. And when we are able to eat in that way, with these insights, we're bringing the light into manas, so that manas can see that the environment is also a part of us. That we are the environment, and the environment is us. And so when we eat here in the New Hamlet, we like to eat together in groups, and then we chit-chat from the beginning to the end. And we miss out the opportunity, to experience this insight. And even if we are having 20 minutes of silent meal, a lot of time we're having this conversation in our head that we missed out, the experience also, the practice of really seeing the interconnectedness between ourselves and the food, between ourselves and the environment. And there's so many beautiful gathas for eating. And one of the gathas that I like to read here is eating in the historical dimension. I maintain the life of my ancestors. So I'm feeding myself, but at the same time, I'm feeding my ancestors, because my ancestors are not outside of me. My ancestors are in every cell of my body. That insight, Manas does not see. And with this gatha and with this practice, we're training Manas to see that. And open an upward path for the descendants. So my children are also a part of me. We are monastic, so we don't have blood children, but maybe my spiritual children. Well, I wouldn't say children, but I would say people who are affected by my presence in my practice, whether directly or indirectly, right? Because we know that energies are something that travel through space and time, that is not just confined to my body. And that my awakening can contribute to the collective awakening of humanity. We learned that. And so my practice, my peace may be affecting other people in that way. So in a sense, they are affected by my practice, they are affected by our practice, and they are a continuation of us. Just like we are a continuation of Thai, and we are a continuation of the ancestor teachers and of the Buddha. And then another opportunity for us to practice, not just once, but many times, it's going to the toilet. It's urinating, defecating. It's a really peaceful time. You're not distracted by anyone. And it's a wonderful opportunity to really see the input and output directly. To see whatever it is that you have taken up in your meal, you're taking in, it's now becoming a part of the earth. And a gatha that I really enjoy, it's urinating in the ultimate dimension. A wonderful exchange takes place. The cosmos and I inter-are. There's no increase or decrease. In Vietnamese, there's the cosmos and I inter-are. Tôi và người. I like that better than the cosmos. Người. And it's a reminder, người, tôi mean I, người, you, person. You, it could be the cosmos, it could be the flowers, it could be my sister. you and I interact. And that's like a constant, that's a really, constant reminders every time I'm sitting, on the toilet, that I am connected with my sisters. I am connected with the food that I eat. And this is another experience for us to taste the insight of interbeing and interconnectedness. And then there's taking a shower, also, unborn and indestructible, beyond time and space. Transmitter and inheritor are one. This body of mine and that of my parents are connected, are deeply connected. In the wonderful nature of reality. So these gathas were written by Thai. And they help enormously. They help me enormously in reflecting, in my reflection, in my practice of looking deeply. And I also encourage my mentee to write gathas so that we can practice, gathas, things that we have not had gathas, that we create them so that we can practice them. And the breathing. The breathing, we think, well, for us, when we are able to come back to our breathing, it helps to cut off all, dispersed thoughts and thinking, right? So that we can be really present here and now. But also the breathing is not just serving us in that way, but when you breathe and you're really there, what do you see? You're taking in this air that we think, that Manas thinks it's the environment, that it's not a self. We're taking it in. We are indispensable without this air. We cannot survive with this air. And this air is becoming a part of mine. And the air that I'm breathing now may be the air that you just breathe out. And just that fact, just that simple reflection and practice of conscious breathing can help us experience the interconnectedness, the interbeing nature of ourselves with everything there is. And we think they're so simple practices, but they're so powerful. They're so powerful in shedding the light, bringing in the light into our mind in order to set us free from the grasping of manas and the manipulation of manas. And so in a sense, manas, it's like the mud of consciousness, right? And the insights are like lotuses. This insight that we practice to cultivate, they're like lotuses. And the practice is not about throwing away the mud. We don't want to throw away manas. We don't want to erase manas from us, from our consciousness. Because when we train manas, when we practice mindfulness, and we download these insights of interbeing, interconnectedness, of non-self into manas, manas transformed. When manas transformed, it becomes a wisdom. It's called the wisdom of non-discrimination. Bình đẳng, tánh trí. It's a wisdom that frees us from all views, views of me and not me. Views that discriminates us and them. And also it frees us from all attachment to views of a separate self. When we can really see that my sisters are really me. My sisters are a part of me. This air that I'm breathing is a part of me. That I'm actually swimming every moment of my life in this a part of me that's outside of me. When we have this insight, the wisdom of non-discrimination, we see wonders and miracles unfolding in every moment of our life. The beauties and the goodness that's unfolding in every moment of our life. Recently, I've, every morning when I go into sitting meditation and I looked around my sisters, the Sangha, and I thought, wow, how beautiful, how wonderful it is that we had voluntarily woke up pretty early in the morning, came into the hall, and just sat down together, not doing anything. Sat down and breathed. Is that beautiful? And yet, like a lot of time, we don't really recognize that. That alone, it's already something really beautiful. And I'm coming in, and I sat down, and I'm breathing in the air that my sisters breathe out. I also breathe in their smell. They're becoming a part of me. Your consciousness is affecting my consciousness. You're nourishing me with your practice. You're feeding me with your practice. And I don't know how you practice this, but the fact that you're coming in and sitting there, you are nourishing me. And yesterday, one of the sisters said, I don't know what it is with the New Hamlet sisters, but every morning, everyone is there in the hall. Which is a really good news, right? That everyone is in the hall. That we really enjoy we really enjoy the practices, and we really enjoy being together. And that's the signature of the New Hamlet. Right, sisters? And so the mud becomes lotus. In the mud, when there is the wisdom of discrimination, we see the lotuses in the mud immediately. And then the mud is no longer the mud, but at the same time we see the mud as lotuses. And so when manas is free, from these wrong perceptions and wrong belief in a separate self, it sees non-discrimination. It is the wisdom of non-discrimination. Then at the same time, store consciousness is also free from the grasping of manas. And store consciousness becomes a wisdom. It's called the wisdom of the great mirror, Đại Viên Cận Trí. It's a wisdom of utmost clarity and purity, where there is no obstruction whatsoever. And so it's like a mirror that reflects everything as they are, the store consciousness. It is the suchness and the true nature. Our true nature. The true nature of realities. And also mind consciousness, which is, stemming from manas, is also transformed and becomes a wisdom called Diệu Quang Sắc Trí, Diệu Quang Sắc Trí. It's the capacity to see deeply into hearts and minds of ourselves and of all beings. It's like having psychic power, isn't it? To see what's going on in the hearts and minds of everybody. To see, we look into the hearts and minds of others, not to discriminate, not to judge, but to see ways in order to help. To see appropriate ways to help relieve the suffering. And also to see clearly practices and teachings that can be appropriate to that particular person, to that particular heart and mind. That's psychic power, isn't it? And the five senses, the five sense consciousnesses are also transformed. They become Thành Sở Tác Trí. It's a wisdom that allows us to realize miracles in the work of serving. So these wisdoms are like miracles, are like psychic power. And it's not far-fetched. It is within our mind. It's already there. It's been covered by the deluded mind, our deluded mind, by manas. And so when we practice mindfulness, concentration, and insight in our daily life, we actually transform in manas. And also transforming the root of the tendency to discriminate in us, so that we can become the light, the bodhisattva, to guide people towards great freedom, great happiness, towards awakening. And it's not just the individual awakening, but it's the collective awakening. And we learned that the individual is made of the collective. When there is awakening in the individual, there's also awakening in the collective. And so each one of us take up the practice so that we can wake up we can be awakened. And it is our awakening that we contribute to the collective awakening of humanity. So it's a really, really beautiful endeavor that every one of us is embarking on and taking up as our lives and purposes. The endeavor to experience interconnectedness, to experience the beauty, goodness, the truth in us and around us. Not just for our own benefit and our own awakening, but also for the collective awakening of humanity. So thank you so much for being part of this journey with us all. And happy continuation on this path, on this journey. So let us listen to the three sounds of the bell. Listen while we are aware of our breathing and of our body. Listen in order to quiet down our mind, to see the oneness between ourselves and the air and the sun and the earth and my community and I.